So, thank you so much for inviting me, especially with such illustrious, amazing company. So, I'm Jessica Cargill Thompson. Just an urban researcher and community engagement consultant. But my background and I suppose former career was as a journalist and writer and editor. So, writing about cities, places, and urban neighbourhoods. Um, so, this is sort of something of a career change, I suppose, which was facilitated. I'm also an alumnus of the UCL Urban Studies Masters course, which I just want to get a plug in for that. So what I wanted to talk about today from my work was my recent work as Community Engagement Officer in the Planning Policy team at Waltham Forest Council. This role was a one-year placement from April last year to April this year, under the auspices of Public Practice, which is a social enterprise which places built environment professionals from the private sector into the public sector with the aim of strengthening and expanding the skill set of local authorities. So previously, Waltham Forest's planning team hadn't had an engagement officer in their team. Basically, how it operated was the planning officers would do their own engagement and draw on the council's in-house communications team, which meant that it tended to be something that was tagged on to the end of the plan making process, and also just putting out there communications and engagement, though engagement requires good communications, I would argue they're not the same thing. So my role, the reason I was brought in by Waltham Forest, was to lead on the statutory consultation for the local plan. So that's the planning policy document that will shape what will be built in the borough over the next 15 years. So where the growth basically, how they're going to meet their housing targets is the bottom line of that. You can see the local plan on the left there. It was quite late in the process, so they'd been working on this local plan since 2017. They'd already gone through various iterations, and this was the formal consultation that was needed for the independent planning officers. I should point out, just to reiterate, all of my engagement was taking place under COVID, so operating within tight COVID restrictions. And just a sort of quick plug on the right, that's my practice note that I've written up for Public Practice, which has all the details of the engagement that I did, but also possibly more interesting to me was what some other local authorities have been doing for their planning, local plan engagement as well at the same time. So what our engagement looked like, we employed various methods. So while it was okay to be outside, we set up some stalls in local high streets and at the very few markets that were still operating. So thereby sort of going to where people were, attracting people in the high street who didn't know anything about local planning, didn't know about the local plan or anything, could see the branded gazebo, come over to find out what was going on, or we could accost people in the street. Have you heard about the local plan? Please, tell us what you think. Some online community meetings, which we did by Zoom. We sent printed leaflets to all of the residential and business addresses in the borough, because of course not everybody has access to digital information. We put information on the website, which arguably was not the easiest website in the world to navigate, and sent out email newsletters to people who'd signed up for the email newsletters. Again, that's people who had already signed up, so people who'd already kind of bought into local plan consultation. So the ideal for the planning officers was to encourage residents to respond to this online through their consultation portal that would then neatly organise the comments that they made into about the relevant section of the local plan, and that would make their life very easy. They also accepted comments by email and post, and also we handed out at the stalls paper response forms that people could write their thoughts on, that we would then input when we got back to the office home computer. So, however, while the planning officers did take on board the comments that were made in the online meetings or the conversations that we had at those stalls, they didn't use those as part of the official consultation responses. They were, there were things that the officers obviously listened to and took very, very seriously, but they aren't part of the official report that will be seen by the independent inspector. So the reasons that the officers wanted it to be like this was that they were concerned that it was a statutory consultation. All comments should be made through official channels so that it could be verified as coming from real people. And they've been working on this plan since 2017, so really didn't want to jeopardize it over sort of technicalities and any sort of potential illegalities. They wanted responses to be in a format, as I said, that would be easy, make that life easy for them, and fitted town and country planning regulations. Now, bear in mind that planning policy teams do tend to be relatively small and cash strapped. So we got, I would say, for the local, it was divided into two parts. So the local plan part one, we got 756 comments from 210 consultees. From the local plan part two, we got 950 comments from 239 consultees. So some of those are the same consultees. So probably about sort of maybe 245, 250 separate people. There were also some formal petitions that were submitted. However, if you added in the people we engaged with in the stalls and online, that came to about 800 people. So I think that those comments that were unofficial were really, really important. And incidentally, some of the other local authorities I talked to did use comments made in their online sessions. So after I'd done the consultation, I talked to local community groups and officers about what worked for them and what didn't. The street stalls got really positive feedback as a good way to engage passers-by. Online digital meetings were a good way to get a lot of information across to a large number of people and were a bit of a learning curve at the time anyway. Now, during the online consultation platform, not so good. It was lots of glitches, lots of community people didn't like it. So of course they ended up most people ended up sending in their responses via email, via letter, which then meant all the planning policy officers were tied up for the whole of January processing these comments and assigning them to the relevant sections. So all their good intentions didn't work. So I think there's a lesson there in terms of allowing people to respond intuitively and how they want to respond, rather than expecting people to fit themselves into some sort of consultation responses structure. Now, by comparison, I just wanted to mention some research that I'm doing now with a group called Social Life, which is another social enterprise. It's a small company based near the Elephant and Castle. And what we've been doing is a project for Southwark Council, looking into how local communities are being affected by change. So Social Life's approach is very ethnographic. It's looking at place-based research and what people's relationship to the places they live is. So for this, we've been doing stakeholder interviews. We've been doing interviews with local businesses, local traders, interviewing people in the street, and doing some walking ethnographies where we go for a walk with somebody and they show us their places and spaces that are important to them. And you really kind of get to see the area really through their eyes, or as close as possible. So I suppose my question from that is the space for this more kind of ethnographic approach within kind of planning policy or planning consultations, in terms of a way to understand the area and the built environment and how people respond to it. I'll put the link in the chat afterwards. So these were the recommendations I made from that at the end of my practice note that I showed at the beginning. Are here. I won't read them all out because that would be quite tedious, but I just wanted to highlight a few. So building resources, as I mentioned, the ethnographic approach is very labour intensive. It's very resources heavy, and I think that's not something in local authorities that is people are really necessarily appreciate how much time and money is needed, and that's something we need to sort of take quite seriously if we want to do engagement more fully. Allow people to express themselves more intuitively. So let's fit engagement around the people we want to engage with and the way that they want to express themselves. And also, as I mentioned, distinguish between engagement and communications. So excuse me, I'm going to have to take a glass of water. So though comms are a good part of good engagement, it's very much a two-way process. So I think I should finish there.